Welcome to West Coast to East Coast, your podcast on the latest news in Canadian immigration and the latest tips on the IELTS, CELPIP, and PTE language proficiency tests. My name is Maria, and I'm a certified Canadian English teacher and language exam expert here to help you get the band scores you need.
And my name is Olena Weber, and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. Okay,
Awesome.
Maria, how are you doing today?
I am doing very, very well here in Vancouver. It's a really nice day. It's not too cloudy and it's not raining, so perfect Vancouver weather.
That's good. That's good. We have super warm spring in Toronto here. The other day, I actually went to the office, and when I came to the office, it was 17 degrees outside. And
wow.
3 hours later, I left the office and it was -3. So
Oh,
just in a couple of hours, the temperature dropped so much. So it's just the crazy Canadian weather swings.
yeah, we always have to leave the house here with an umbrella and some sunglasses in Vancouver because we never
Yeah.
know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Okay, so let's cover some updates that we've had in the world of immigration in the last week. So
Yes,
the
please.
biggest update that we've had was that the government introduced two new programs. So both
Okay.
programs are set to launch in the fall of 2024. So one program is called Rural Community Immigration Pilot. And that's, if some people know this program, it's called RNIP. And because RNIP, Rural Northern Immigration Pilot, was so popular, now they kind of extended it and they called it Rural Community Immigration Pilot. And based on this program, they created Francophone Community Immigration Pilot. So they're very
Okay.
similar, Rural Immigration Pilot and Francophone Immigration Pilot. And basically, the whole concept of these two programs is that the government is trying to help smaller communities, selected smaller communities throughout Canada. So there are some Ontario, some Alberta, Manitoba, BC, I believe. They're mostly like northern parts, and they're like truly smaller communities that would benefit from immigration and the workforce coming into those little towns. And
Right.
yeah, so those are like specific programs targeting those communities, and it's been like very, very, very successful. So now the government introducing the francophone kind of type of immigration to those smaller communities. So what we keep seeing basically more and more is that francophone immigration takes more and more place in Canadian immigration. And again, one of the other news this week, other than opening a francophone and those community pilots, another news was that Alberta closed one of their most successful immigration programs. So just in the last week, we really, really see how some immigration streams are closing and francophone immigration streams are opening.
Which stream
And
was it that closed?
so it's called Alberta. I don't do immigration PNP programs in Alberta specifically, because in terms of PNP programs, we deal only with Ontario. But just from kind of general knowledge, I know that it's a very successful program. It's called Alberta Opportunity Stream.
Opportunity stream, right.
Yes, and it's
Closed it, okay.
very common. Yeah, it's like super successful. A lot of like Ukrainians were applying through that programs, and not only Ukrainians, but Ukrainians who really like applying through that program a lot. And yeah, now everybody is disappointed and nobody knows when it's going to reopen. It was a huge surprise for everybody. But on another side, we have other streams opening up. Right. So it's I think it's just these news, they really show the trajectory of immigration policies, in a sense of that um, a lot of doors are closing, but some doors are opening. And the doors that are
Right.
opening, a lot of them, they are francophone related streams, or they're very targeted, like as I said, like community based programs or occupation based programs, right? So there are like these like very targeted programs. So it's just that another one more time, it shows us the importance of French language
Right.
And for now, actually, we don't know what French language score we will need for this Francophone
Yeah, I was going
community.
to ask you if they already had established the CLB minimum for those programs.
I didn't see it in the announcement because it just was announced on March 6th. So, and they didn't really say any specific. I'm just looking through it here. No, they didn't put any specifics. Normally, it's CLB 7 for French.
Mhm.
However, I think there is a possibility it's going to be lower than 7, because what I'm thinking is that if they are targeting those small communities, and it's outside of Quebec, right? Like it has to be outside of Quebec for federal programs to work. So if they're targeting like small communities outside of Quebec, French-speaking communities, to bring more French-speaking people there, like the demand on these programs is not going to be that high. Like they're really not a lot of francophone people.
So they
So
want
I
to make
think
it
they
more
have
feasible.
they have to, yeah, bring the CLB a little bit down to make sure that this program succeeds. So I think there is a possibility it can be CLB 5, maybe.
And for those of you who haven't listened to episode 1, we did talk about what the CLB stands for, which is the Canadian Language Benchmark. And the CLB 7 is equivalent to the upper end of the B1 intermediate scale. So if you do want to get a CLB 7, it is a little bit more challenging than, say, a CLB 5, which we will be talking about in just a minute.
Yes, so that's the news. Another day of expanding opportunities for people who would like to learn French or maybe already have some knowledge of French. So that's great for those applicants for sure. And in this episode, we actually wanted to talk about certain opportunities that immigrants have for extending their work permits, and
Okay.
specifically, I wanted to cover this one program, which is called, and a lot of people just don't realize how good it is. It's called Francophone Mobility Program. And
Mhm.
before all of our English speakers turn off this podcast, because if you don't know French, you may be a little bit hesitant, right? But I do want to say that this program, Francophone Mobility Program, is a program for extension of your work permit, and the level of French is very,
Yeah.
like it's pretty low. So it really, if you even don't know French, like at all, it just still makes sense to listen ahead. So we can talk about this in a little bit, because you can still learn French to the level to qualify for a work permit extension under this program. So let me
Right.
quickly explain how it works, and then I'll have a couple of questions to you, Maria, just so we can have a little bit better grasp on like what the individual needs to learn in order to qualify for this.
Yeah.
So basically, how this program works is that if you have a work permit expiring, you're in Canada, or maybe you're outside of Canada, and you want to apply for a work permit, you normally, under normal circumstances, you would need to go through a pretty difficult process of getting a labor market impact assessment from your employer. And normally it's like just really difficult, right? However, because the government really wants to encourage francophone people to come to Canada or stay in Canada, government created this work permit program, which they say is that if you are able to pass French on CLB 5,
Mhm.
but only, that's a trick, only speaking and listening. So that's only two sections that you need to do. You need to do only speaking and listening, CLB 5. Then you are able to apply for a work permit extension without LMIA.
That's
So
huge. That's
it's
so
very,
huge.
yeah, it's huge. It's simplified process. And it's still, you still need a job offer, like in a sense of like you still need an employer in Canada. So it's not going to be an open work permit. It's still going to be closed to like your employment in Canada, whatever position you have in Canada. So there's still certain like little process that your employer needs to go through, just to make sure that people don't abuse this program. So it's still, it's still not like 100% easy. There's still some involvement from employer, but it's like 1,000 times easier than what it is for people who don't know French.
Hmm.
So
That's
as I
huge.
said, Maria, yeah, like you need only CLB 5, right? So
Yeah.
listening and speaking 5. So that's my question to you. I know that you guys recently started offering, French
Mhm.
programs, or like tutoring. I guess it's tutoring, is it?
Yes, we offer French tutoring online, and that's with teacher Mark. So, Mark is our French Canadian teacher. He is from New Brunswick, although he does live in Vancouver. So, he is a native Canadian French teacher, and he does offer those online classes. Now, what is a CLB 5? Now, the Canadian language benchmark is used for both French and English. And when we use the Canadian language benchmark, it is a scale from 0 to 9, and it is compared to what is called the Common European Framework of Reference. Now, that is an international scale to basically put your language proficiency on a level. So, when you're thinking of your proficiency level in your first language, you would be considered C2 or native speaker level, very advanced. To give you an idea, CLB5, it's on the lower end of a B1 intermediate. So it's not very high. If I could have an image here, which I don't on a podcast, it's audio, just to give you an idea, it goes A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So if C2 is native speaker, B1 is quite a lot down. So there's C2, C1, B2, B1. So we're going all the way down that scale. So if you want to learn French at a B1 level, it's just like 3 steps above a beginner, like very beginner. When I say beginner, it's like colors. Hi, how are you? Like learning how to introduce yourself. It's not that hard to get to that level if you put in the work and the effort. So I did do a little bit of digging and research, and according to linguistic experts, going from no French whatsoever to an intermediate level does take approximately 800 hours of guided learning. Now that does sound maybe a little bit daunting at first, but if you break it down over time in chunks and if you're motivated, it's doable, right? It
But
maybe
800 hours, that's like until like higher than CLB 5, is it?
that could also be a CLB 7 even because
Yeah.
remember that the CLB 5, 6, and 7 are all B1 intermediate. Those are
Oh, okay.
yeah, CLB 5, 6, and 7 are all considered B1 intermediate. They are just different levels of it. There's the higher end of B1 intermediate, and then there's the lower end of B1 intermediate. That's the interesting part. You can be B1 intermediate and still be CLB 5, CLB 6, and CLB 7. They're all considered B1 intermediate. That's why I'm saying that the CLB 5 is the lower end of the B1 intermediate. So I would say it's actually less than 800 hours. I would say probably 600 or 500 hours. Personally, I don't really like thinking in terms of that many hours in terms of your I would think of it more in terms of your effort because everybody is different, right? Everybody has different interest in how much they study. Everybody has less or more time that they can study. Everybody has different learning styles. Some people might be more visual, some people might be more audio, and they might like podcasts. So it's a personal journey when they're learning a language. So while when you look online and you find these studies as to how many hours it might take to learn a language, those are very general blanket statements based on studies. I would focus more on your enjoyment of learning the language and take it as a journey. Because if you were to start learning dance or to start going to the gym, you wouldn't think of it as, okay, this was 1 more hour down, You take it as you go and you start the journey and then you see as you improve. Every day, you're going to notice an improvement.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's just for this, maybe we'll put a link in a description for this
Hmm.
Francophone Mobility Work Permit Extension Program. Or not, it's not only extension. You can technically, even if you're overseas, you can apply for it. Or if you're in Canada, you can apply for
Yeah.
it. As long as you can score CLB 5 in listening or speaking, and you have a employer in Canada, because it still has to be like employer specific work permit.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link in a description so nobody gets confused what we're talking about. But I think it's just in terms of CLB level, it's really cool. And it's one of not many times that we can see in immigration that it's only two sections that are being assessed. So speaking and listening
Hmm.
has to be CLB 5. And
Right.
it's really good because you don't need to focus essentially like on writing and reading in terms of like
Yes,
preparation for the test, right? You can just focus on
exactly.
speaking and listening. And I feel like listening, like I would be able to score CLB 5 in French because yeah, I'm very good like with making it like making it work in my head, like, and like putting words together and like understanding and kind of like guessing, especially if it's, I don't know if it is multiple choice, but if it is multiple choice. So I think it's just it like listening would be like really good for a lot of people in French. Speaking is harder, right? Like speaking, you
Yeah,
have to like really,
because you're
really.
producing the language.
Yes, it's much, much harder. And it really depends, I think, on the person, right? Because some people are more like if they're more introverts and it's for, it's for them just naturally harder to produce, right? Like that speaking part, even in their own language, then it may be a little bit more challenging. But still, I think it's just really good opportunity to come to Canada as a worker if you can pass that English or stay in Canada and extend your work permit based on this program. And maybe in I don't know, you may be able to answer that question, but maybe some Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers would even get a little bit of a head start
Yes,
in
I
this,
would
right?
think so. And I would also give you a couple of tips.
Yeah.
This is also speaking from a language examiner. A CLB 5, like the difference between a CLB 5 and a CLB 6 is that a CLB 5 speaker, they usually can produce really simple sentences, like a difference between like a simple sentence and a complex sentence, just to kind of give you an example. A simple sentence is like, I like pizza. It's just like a short, simple sentence. And most people at a CLB 5 level, they kind of speak or write in very short, simple sentences like, I like pizza. I live in Canada. But when you get to a CLB 6 level, you should start being able to produce more complex sentences like, I like pizza because I lived in Italy for many years working as a teacher. And you can start producing more longer sentences. So it does get harder to produce longer and more complex sentences because there are more components to it, which we teach in our classes. To get a CLB 5, it's not that hard because you are producing just small sentences and you don't have to have all this complexity. So I hope that doesn't scare you so much when you are, speaking. And also, if you have to pause and hesitate on your speaking test to think, that's okay. If you're like thinking, oh, how do I say this? I'm kind of stuck or I feel frozen. That is more allowed at a CLB 5 level
Mhm.
than a CLB 6 or a CLB, going upwards. Not so much, but at a CLB 5, it's okay to have to stop and think.
Yes, that's good to know. I honestly think it's very doable for any person to learn CLB 5 speaking and listening parts, and get them to that CLB 5 level, because the benefit of it is so 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 huge. Like getting that work permit extended, it's like for like literally no effort in a sense of your employer, right? Because the way I think about it, and I always say this to my clients, that it's just so much easier to put an effort into learning a language than to put an effort into convincing your employer to do LMIA. Like that's the
Exactly.
way I look at it, because when you learn a language, all like everything depends on you and your effort, and you can kind of like be in control of situation, like how well you're going to pass the test. When you put an effort into looking for employer who does LMIA, or like convincing your current employer who does LMIA, who like would potentially do LMIA, like I think it's just a lot of unknowns there, like, and it doesn't depend on you. It's not in your control what the employer is going to do or they're going to say, right?
Right.
So it's just like really cool opportunity, even for people with like zero French. I think if you have a little bit of time on your hands until your current work permit expires, then like use that time to learn French to CLB5 and speaking and listening.
Yeah. I think it's a
Yeah.
great opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And then who knows, maybe that would be a stepping stone for you to apply for further francophone immigration, right? Because if you already there and you can do CLB5 in speaking and listening, and you already extended your work permit using this francophone mobility program, then that can be your first stepping stone into further francophone immigration programs. Because right now you can pretty much apply for PR if you have 300 points in express entry, but if
Yes.
you can score that French on a bit higher level now. For immigration, you need French CLB 7. So, but
Right.
that CLB 5 can be just your first step, and you win yourself time to you get that work permit, and then you continue learning French, and then you can hopefully score CLB 7 to apply for actual permanent residency.
Yes. This is just biding you time, is giving you that, that extra time for you to improve your French to then later on apply for that later program.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing I wanted to say is that like we always talk about like immigration and like English or French, and how you can use it in immigration process, like to get a permanent residence in Canada. But often, like we talked with you, Maria, about this, often we forget about like the benefits of learning the language outside of immigration, right?
That's very true. That's very true. Like there are so many benefits to learning the language, not just for the test.
Yeah, not just for the test, exactly. And for francophone employment in, for example, in Ontario, and I'm sure it's similar in, BC or other parts of Canada, is that generally jobs are like higher wage if you can speak French. Like I've seen my francophone
Mm,
clients doing jobs, as a customer service, or any other kind of like bank jobs as bilingual
okay.
representatives. And it's like the salary difference is quite significant, like it's quite
Hmm,
significant. So it presents, and plus you just have less competition when you have less competition when you going against bilingual candidates, right? Like because it's just less people who can
right.
speak both languages,
Or
right?
you can also apply for like government jobs as well.
Yeah, well, that would be amazing, right? Like government jobs for sure. Like like the benefits that government jobs provide are great. So yeah, like those are long term benefits of really just starting. But I like that government, like in terms of this francophone work permit extension program, that the level is like so low. Of course you still need like put effort in it, but it's so low that the government like provides you that like first step, right? So you have that
Right.
first encouragement, like you can accomplish that CLB5, then this is like that's it, that's your first step. Then you can do CLB7, then you get a
Baby
PR,
steps.
right? Yeah, so I like how you can, like in my head it's like it all makes sense, right? Like for each step I get a reward. Like
Yeah,
first step I get a work permit, second step I get a PR. So it makes sense.
I like
Um,
it.
yes, yes. Yeah, so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about. Let me see what else we wanted to cover today. Oh, another thing I wanted to cover is that just because immigrants are asking this question all the time, what are other options to extend work permit? So I just wanted to quickly cover that. So basically, if you are in Canada and you right now can't apply for permanent residency, which a lot of people can't, because a lot of programs are shutting down or like having very limited quota, or being very, just hard to get in. So if you can't apply for permanent residence and you need to extend your work permit, essentially you have only like a couple of options. So option number
Mhm.
one, and this is more the most classic option, is ask your employer to apply for a labor market impact assessment. It's not
Mhm.
easy to find the employer, or to make sure that your employer really understands how the process works. It's just not easy, but that's the most like classic option. So LMIA. Now, number two would be to see if your country maybe has a free trade agreement with Canada. So a lot of times, even immigration consultants, even I'm guilty of this myself, like, we just forget about those free trade agreements, because it's not very like common thing to do. But for example, Canada and Colombia has a free trade agreement which allows any citizen of Colombia to apply for a work permit without LMIA. Canada and Chile has the
Yes.
same. Yeah.
Yes.
Canada and Peru has. We had a client from Peru recently. We had a client from Chile. We did that. Then all European countries have it. Like Mexico has it. Like, there are a lot of countries. It really depends which country you're from. So it's just worth exploring, because a lot of times it gets overlooked. And
Mhm.
it's just, even
Are those work
immigration
permits
professionals. Yeah.
so are those work permits usually, restricted to a certain age group?
No,
Like
not age group. No, they're normally restricted to employer. So
employer?
yeah, so employer, but not age group. No.
Okay. I thought that the Chilean one was under 30 for some reason.
No, no.
Okay.
Sometimes
Interesting.
they have like each country has different rules. Sometimes they have like there are another like other programs that like with European countries, but some of them are restricted. But free trade agreements, like normally they're not. No, they're more
Okay.
restricted in terms of occupations. But it's pretty good. Like it just gets I feel like it gets overlooked. Like people just forget about those. And even immigration professionals, we just like work so much with countries that don't have those free trade agreements that we forget that some countries actually do. So
Right.
yeah. So that's the one to explore. So LMIA is free trade agreements, and then the other like option is bridging open work permit, which is essentially like if you already applied for PR, then you can apply to extend your work permit. But I mean, if you haven't applied for PR, then you don't have that option, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, like I mean, that's about it. Like you cannot just extend your work permit, and a lot of people think that they can. Like a lot of people think that they just can extend, and you can't. Like you need to have a reason to extend, and like kind of reason in terms of government would be eligibility. So either employer support, or you're a French speaker, right? CLB5 and speaking or listening, and Canada wants French speakers, right? So that's their like reasoning why they're giving you a chance to extend your work permit, right? So you cannot just like extend just because. You always need to have that eligibility. Um, so yeah, so that's why it's a little bit stressful, like especially for some people that are on their last year of work permit.
Mhm.
But right now it's in 2024, like it's so tough
Right.
for immigrants. So that's why, yeah,
Well,
like
it's good
that.
that you're giving this information and we're being honest and helpful so that people can make realistic plans.
Yes, we were just talking, but before we hit the button record, we were just talking. Maria said that, like, do you think 800 hours of learning French seems to be a very scary number? And my point was that I think that we need to be honest with people, right? Because if the way I always explain this to like during the consultations and to my clients is that I think about you as a like a little bowl of like resources, and you decide what to do with those resources and where to direct them. So if you take 50% of your resources and direct them to learning French language, you better make sure that that actually brings a result. And if you
Mhm.
think learning French is going to take like 100 hours, then then it's just not realistic, right? But if you know that it is taking effort and it is taking 800 hours like to learn it to like a very good level, right? Like until like a very very solid level, that then you can actually direct your resource. You can make an informed decision. You can decide whether you want to allocate those 50% of your resources to learning French and whether it makes sense to you specifically, right?
Right, exactly. Yes. It's about intention with your time.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you want to then like that that okay, like it's not going to be walk in the park learning French, right?
Mhm.
Like new language. Maybe you for your specific situation you decide to okay, maybe I take these whatever 50% of resources and I direct them towards I don't know relocating to a different province that maybe will provide me with better immigration options, right? Because relocating is also hard. Like it's extremely difficult, right? But that's a choice like what to do with your kind of resources inside of you, right? And for a lot of people it really does make sense to learn French just because most of immigrants in Canada they are like statistically under 30 years old. So as we know, learning new language, the younger you are the easier it is.
Mhm.
Also most of immigrants they already have experience learning English, right? And I
Yes.
think that also helps.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's just the matter of a decision, but just learning to CLB5 and like having that option of extending your work permit, I think it's just a great first stepping stone.
And of course, that those 800 hours were mentioned as guided learning, and having somebody who's there to help you and step by step and giving you those instructions will speed that up. So if you are looking for someone who's going to help you, you can always get in touch with us here. Mark will be able to help you. He's an amazing French teacher. I particularly don't teach French, but I would be more than happy to introduce you to Mark, and he'll be more than happy to support you in your French learning journey.
Well, we need to decide when we're going to invite Mark to our podcast
Yes,
because it's our second episode and we've been talking about French just because it's such a hot topic in immigration,
I'll
right?
have
So I
to speak
really
with
want to
him.
make sure, yeah, like make sure that we cover this and people know the actual options available. Like what happens if you do learn French, right? So we need to decide when we're going to invite him because that
Yes,
would
I'll
be
talk
fun.
to him. I'll call him then, and we'll figure
Yeah.
this out then.
Yes, yes, yes. That would be great. Okay, Maria, did we cover it all? What do you think?
I think so. I think we've talked about the LMIA, CLB5, speaking and listening as well. So I think we are good to go for the week.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us today. You can download this podcast on all the platforms Apple, Spotify. You can follow English for Canada on YouTube, where you can
Yes,
also listen to this podcast. And thank you
yes.
so much.
And for next week, don't forget to tune in. We're going to be talking about the mindsets of an immigrant in Canada and how that has changed and evolved from 2020 to 2024. Maybe you could
Yes,
start thinking
it's
about how
going to be
things.
a spicy one.
Yeah, maybe a bit controversial. So, bring the popcorn.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we'll see you next week.
See you
Bye,
next week.
everybody.